Hey everybody, this is Sully with 5 freaking onion rings, and this is my Tyro79 build, setup, flight, the whole 9 yards, and I'm just going to jump right in. And this is Sully from the future. I just wanted to show a picture of the flight controller. I have another video on how these plugs in, but I figured I would do a visual here. In the upper right corner with the cable that already has the green wire, that is your VTX connection. Beside it to the left, that is your camera connection, in which case you will only use the pins that are to the leftmost side against the main ESC to flight controller connector. I have arrows pointing. At the very bottom, that is your receiver connector. To the right of the receiver connector are your S-bus, your middle pin, which is your signal wire, and your PPM. You will have to bridge one of these, or two of these, three, in order to make your receiver work. That's coming up in a little bit in this video. It was the only issue I ran into, otherwise very straightforward. So we're going to jump back in and go through it. Just suffice it to say, watch the other video to see what's in there and a couple of tips and tricks. This one has a few things that I have had issues with. But we're starting off very simply just putting on the XT30 cable. I'm putting it on the top of the ESC, which some people put it on the bottom so you don't put strain on your cap, and I probably should have done that, but this actually works very well. There's no strain at all. It's the cap rests against the body, so it's not like you'd have to have a really, really, really bad crash to affect the cap, and I don't even think at that point you would. So this is actually the only soldering you have to do in this whole build, except for one more piece that I didn't know about until later. So we're going to leave that for a surprise. Just go through pre-tin all of the pads. I'm going to fast forward here so you don't have to watch it, but you're just pretending all of your ESC pads. And ignore my bad soldering skills. I'm actually using lead-free solder, so it gives some little bit of complications. And in this case, I'm using new rosin or new flux, which I don't seem to like as much. But anyway, we're fasting forward and we're going to come up to the next step. So while we're walking through this, I just want to remind you to always use flux and use a good bit of heat. And yeah, so here we come up with a tin pad. Now when you get your Tiro, you lay out all your pieces, you're going to have 3 sets of screws, and some of them are shiny, and the shiny ones go on the side of the metal body, and some of them are flat. You have the 3 sizes. The longest are for screwing through and holding the motors, and then middle are for all of the, those are the longest, yeah, for the motors. The middle are for the stack, and the short are to hold on the small pieces to the body. You'll also have a couple of Phillips, yeah, you'll also have 3 Phillips screws that will hold your camera in place. You have multiple extras of everything, so don't worry about if you run out of, if you drop one. You have a lot of extras, or not a lot, at least one extra. Now I typically like to lay everything out and bolt my motors down and solder with the motors bolting down, but in this case I'm going to undo them and hold them across, and the reason being you have to solder these and wrap around the post that holds the whole stack in place. So that with these plastic wires is very, very difficult to do with the motors in place. So what I did was just take them off and hold them across from the ESCs so that I am soldering from the other side, so that I'm actually holding straight and I don't have to worry about bending the wires, so I can solder them in place this way. This actually helped me a lot because I was having trouble with these plastic wires, since you pretty much end up melting the plastic if you hold the solder in place for too long. So trying to finagle around a loop and everything just did not work well at all for me. So yeah, ending up holding it across and soldering it on and then looping the wires around the center post helped a lot. I ended up having to use a tiny bit of heat shrink in a couple of cases, or in one case, that yellow in the back that you see, that's heat shrink where I melted the plastic a little bit. So I learned this method of just holding across and then pretty much tighten it back down. Moving on to the next. Just moving on to the next and the next. Just soldering. And once I get 3 wires soldered in place, I'll screw on the rubber standoff for the flight controller, and then wrap the wires around it and tighten the motor mounts back up, or the motors back around. And that was the only way I could figure out how to do this without melting the plastic and holding things at awkward angles. So yeah, putting the rubber mount on and just spinning it around. And what you end up with is actually not horrible. So I'm kind of surprised at how well it turned out working this way, but it's just a matter of wrapping it around, and there you go. So the only other soldering you have to do is to take the receiver wire, and you're going to just cut it, and unless you're using a Futaba or something that uses that servo connector, and you're going to strip the wires down, pre-tend the wires, and do some magic. Do the same to your other connector that you use for your receiver. Strip it down, and you're going to basically hide everything from view from the camera in a second here. So once you get them all down, it's a magic trick at this point. You dip in some soldering, and then you hide everything from the camera, and you shift around, and next thing you know, it's poofed. It's all together. And then you plug in your receiver, and that is now your receiver cable. So I hate soldering wires, by the way. Okay, so I did run into one problem. This is your receiver, and if you notice beside it, you have S-bus, the inversion, and PPM pins. I'm using a flysky IS, one of the inexpensive little flysky receivers, and it outputs iBus and it's supposed to output S-bus, but outputs iBus. And I had it wired straight into here. I took the wire out, obviously, but I had it wired straight in to this port, and it did not work. And I tried everything, every configuration setting I could. I changed my ports, I changed everything I could possibly change. And then I happened to see above it, you have TX2 and RX2, the two little pads. Let me get a pointer here. You have TX2 and RX2. So I ran a yellow wire to my connector going out, and I'm going to solder it to this pin. This is for flysky only, to this pin, or pad rather, and that actually showed the receiver tab. It was not showing beforehand. So if you do have flysky and you use this connector and it does not work, the signal wire can go to RX2. So this is what I'm talking about with the flysky. I have a simple flysky receiver, and I had to pull the cable out of the tab and put it into RX2. This is me from the future, and I've learned since then that if you look at the middle pin between S-bus and PPM, you will see that one of the traces goes from the signal wire to that pad. If you're using S-bus, you simply have to bridge the left 2 pins, and if you're using iBus, you use the right 2 pins, or PPM. You have to bridge the right 2 pins. And in doing so, you can use the connector and not the ugly method that I used. Mine does work fine though, so if you don't want to use a small pad, then you can solder to the top pad, the RX2. And I just realized how much I need to clean up that solder joint. But it does work, it works fine. Just use the pad or bridge the 2 pins correctly. And now that you have all of the soldering done, all you have to do is simply plug everything in, put your stack on. I put my ESC cable in and ran the ribbon to the inside just to fit it down. And then I'll plug my flight controller in above that and see where I got scratched. But I did not leave my props on. That's just an actual scratch from working on a car. So yeah, it's close to my hand. Next time I'll find a better angle. We're going fast forward. So yeah, just plug the or the flight controller into the ESC cable and put it on top, push down. So here we are with the finished product, and basically you have standoffs, the ESC, rubber standoffs, the flight controller, a nut, another set of standoffs, the VTX, and the VTX and another set of screws. What I love about this quad, I have to say, are these motors. They are 2800 kV 1607s. After flying them, holy cow, Ishin did a great job. Probably my favorite motors so far. I didn't expect to like these at all, but they're very efficient and they are just great. As far as, I think I had originally recorded a bunch of audio for this, but my files were corrupted, so we'll speed through. But this is the good, bad, and the ugly, with the bad being my soldering. One thing about this, the frame itself is a great frame, except it's not finished very well. So you'd be best off to go around with a file underwater and round out the edges. Some of these look a little like they could delaminate a bit or start to shred and get splinters in your fingers, so be careful. Things I like about it, the ESC actually is a strong point, not really a weak point. The motors, as good as they are, they do have plastic cabling. So that yellow piece you see, that is due to me melting the plastic cable. And it just took literally a bump from the soldering iron to melt that. So I put heat shrink around it and it works fine. The VTX in this configuration is installed upside down. And if you want to, you can flip it over, and I'm probably going to do that. One thing about this that I'm not showing here is that you have to clip off those top threads so that your frame will fit. If it's like this and you wedge the frame in place, you will end up hating yourself because it will knock the whole stack out of whack. Stack out of whack, that's pretty good. It'll knock the whole stack out. It's pretty good otherwise. I'm surprised it didn't fit perfectly since, that's what it was built for. But, what can you say? You just snip off the top so it'll give yourself some clearance with the frame. As far as the connectors, like I was saying before in the other video, on the left-hand side, so you have your main ESC to flight controller connector on your right, and that's a one-way only, can only fit. The camera fits into that left connector, which is actually a 4-pin connector, so you have to slide it all the way over to the right. What am I looking at here? The VTX plugs into this one. The cable has the only blue, so that's easy to tell it's the VTX cable. And yeah, one thing I will be doing in the future is definitely using this on a 4-inch because of the wires are long enough and whatnot. Now, NDRC put his XT30 cables on the bottom side so they wouldn't put pressure on the capacitor. But once you're bolted in place, the way I have it with them on the top side doesn't seem to bother. It was easier for me to do anyway. And as far as the VTX, that's actually pretty easy. It just fits on top. But once again, you have to snip those nylon connectors off. I don't know what I was recording here, but we're going to jump a little bit. Now, some people with eagle eyes can tell that I have my motors on backwards, so I do have the props rotating to the outward position. And this is what I was talking about. I did not notice whenever I put the side of the frame on that the nylon standoffs were actually going too high, so it was getting knocked out like an idiot. Just didn't notice. Yeah, so that's pretty much the build itself. The outside just goes together. There's a manual I'll link down below. It's the one from Banggood. It's not that comprehensive of a manual. And yeah, you do, once again, have to buy your own receiver. That's the only thing it doesn't come with that you'll need other than a battery, of course. And yeah, so this is pretty much mostly built, just buttoned up. I will say, and I don't have it on video here, the camera fits in and you can get a massive amount of up tilt. So that part is really good. And the screws are tight. So the way they did the camera in this, very, 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 very good. It isn't wide enough for me, but I'm pretty sure for some people it's way too wide. So, yeah, I would not call it a weak point by any stretch of the imagination. I actually love how it mounts and I love how it sits. Everything together came just great. It all came together with no problems in terms of putting it together. It took about 45 minutes, even with all the issues I had. If you haven't had a chance, there is a new video on how to get Betaflight 10.5 configurator that is pretty cool. So that's this one, I hope. Yeah, 10.5 configurator. It's only available in Chrome at the moment, but it's pretty cool. The last time I tried it, it did not have the OSD elements, but we're going to see what it does here. And with the Tyro, I thought that it was a very simple matter of it was configured, but it was not. So you pretty much have to do a base flash. And so we're going to start there. Arming disabled. All right. Ports, yeah. So just remember this. I've already been through this once, but I'm going to start over because I feel like I screwed up some stuff. And I always like to have a fresh start when I do. So we're going to hit update firmware. I don't know if that actually puts it in DFU mode or not. Let's see. Oh. Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. Learn something new every day. Just so you know, the Tyro has the Maytech F411 board. It's a customized version in that it has plugins instead of direct solder. So we're just going to go enable expert, activate bootloader, DFU mode. Make sure you see that. Firmware flasher. Oh, cool. Show unstable, expert. I do want full chip. And I don't think I have to do a manual baud. And release candidates. That sounds good. We'll go 355. It came with 351, but was absolutely unconfigured. So we're going with 355. All right. Lost communication. Flash. Erasing. Good. I have not done it on 10.5.0 yet, so here's hoping. My other videos, or the other parts of this video, have some of the complications with the flight controller itself if you're using flysky, and it's not really a complication, just something I've never had to go through before. And we're done. See if it reboots automatically. It does. Sweet. So firmware 355, 0 volts, ports. This is exactly how it came, but this is incorrect. UART2, UART1, you want TBS Smart Audio. So VCP, all right. Even the way it comes does not work. It looks like it's configured. It is not. I can't repeat that enough. There are pretty much no changes to it. It's pretty bad. So it's a basic, here's your flight controller. Good luck. And I don't know if you noticed. Disconnect, reconnect. Does not work. Just remember this is beta version of configurator. So it did keep the changes. Configuration. I want D-Shot 600. I put my props on backwards for this build. Many reasons, but I did. 5.5. I normally go 5.5 to 6.0 for that so that I don't get desyncs, and that's worked pretty well. D-Shot 600. This board they say is capable of 32K, but I want to do 8K, 8K with accelerometer, and I'm not sure if it has a barometer, but I'm going to leave it enabled. I believe it does, so it can show altitude, possibly, but it might not, so it's not a big deal if it's enabled or not. My other quads have it. Sensor alignment, I was able to put this together with no changes to sensor alignment or trims. Arming, I'm leaving the accelerometer enabled, and at that case If you leave it on 25 as the arm angle, that's 25 degrees or above, it will not arm. So you can't take off from a hill or a level surface, anything that's not level pretty much. If you set it to 180, you can take off from any angle. If you, like I say, if you have 25, you can't arm unless you're level or up to 25 degrees of incline. And yeah, some of the boxes are 45 to 90 or 70 degrees really. So I'd put that 180 so you can wiggle your way out of a tree. Camera, this is for the FPV roll compensation so that you can pretty much fly by using your yaw instead of roll and yaw combined. It will coordinate for you. And is it yaw? No, I'm sorry, it'll use roll. Anyway, I don't use it, so don't worry about it unless you like to use it. It's very good, but whatever. S-Bus, I'm using flysky, so I need iBus. RSSI I don't have. I don't want to do 3D, GPS. Soft serial you do need to leave on. Telemetry you can turn off. Channel forwarding, transit, air mode I always turn on. OSD on, anti-grav, and dynamic filters on. RX lost. I do not have a beeper in here, so I want to turn this on so the ESCs make the tones for me. And all the other stuff I leave alone. Going to save and reboot. Saved. See, it sounds like it's going to reboot, but that is not really a reboot. It's a reboot, it just doesn't really reconnect. So we're going to disconnect. Like I say, I'm in the beta version of Configurator. So let's go make sure configuration saves, quad X, reverse motors, yada yada yada, yada yada, 8K, 8K. It says it's 32K enabled. I'm at 20%, and that's with everything that I would normally turn on. It's a very fast processor, so I gotta give them credit there. Especially for the price. This thing was $79. $79.66 shipped. This, going to power and configuration, 3335. I'm going to run that down because I use smaller batteries. So I'm going to say 3133 with maximum cell. I normally don't touch scale, but I haven't checked it yet. And we'll see once we fly a little bit. There is no current meter, but I'm going to leave that on just to see. Because it might. Oh, I don't know. Stage 1 failsafe, 4 guard time. I like to have 10. That will give me 1 full second of being out of range before it drops out of the sky. Make sure land, you just don't land. It doesn't have an idea of how high you are or where the ground is, so landing doesn't work. Disconnect. Connect. Failsafe power. Okay, failsafe. That took PID tuning. Now for this, I'm actually going to leave the PIDs alone for right now. I am turning on VBAT, Smart Feed, iTerm Relax. Throttle boost at 5 sounds good. Absolute control I don't use that much. Feed forward transition, this just makes it a little softer until it gets to the feed forward part. iTerm Relax, RPY, gyro. I do like my rates a little bit higher. I'm not going to make this one as twitchy as I normally make my quads. I'd like to have a little bit of leeway. So yeah, I'm going to save that. Going filters. I'm leaving this stock. This is also the way it comes from Ishin, Banggood. I don't do much in the way of that. Okay, receiver. I don't have my receiver plugged in, but I do want to change this to filter. RPYT, auto, biquad, auto, biquad. These look good. High threshold, 1990. Low threshold, 10. 10. I don't know if that truly helps, but it's what I do. It's just how I am now. Okay, modes, arm. I like that to be aux1, angle. I'm not going to use it much, but it's aux2, horizon, aux2. This is the 3-position switch on the flysky. And beeper, number 5. And I don't see launch control. Oh, I don't. Oh, launch control's on Betaflight 4.0. FPV angle mix is what you would use if you wanted to set your camera back before, where I did not know. I don't use turtle mode with these small quads because once it's in the ground, it's pretty much in the ground. And acro trainer is fun, but I don't really care about it anymore. That would allow you to fly without flipping, so it will set a designated max angle. So most of the time it's about 20 or 25 degrees, which will get you in flight, but won't let you flip, so you turn upside down and smash yourself in the face or in the ground. Adjustments. I don't use servos. Motors, this part's important. So I just built this quad, and I'm not sure which way the motors are turning, so I'm going to turn this on. I wired all 4 motors up the exact same way, so like the number 1 wire on the right side always goes to the inside and everything. So I'm going to plug in a battery. Make sure you have your props off. Take your props off. I'm plugging in a 2S battery, just so you know. I understand the risks, and I'm going to spin up each motor and mark which ones are backwards. So here's one. One is actually going correct direction. Remember, I have reversed props, so 1 is correct, 2 is not correct, 3 is not correct, and 4 is correct. And since I wired them up in the same way, that actually makes sense. 1 and 3 have to be 1 and 4 are correct, and 2 and 3 are not correct. Yeah, so they spin outside. That's all I need from that. Anytime you're on this page, make sure your props are off. Absolutely no other way around it. So we're going to jump to BLHeli in a minute and switch them around. So I am unplugging my quad here. Okay, unplugged again. So now no sound, we're good. All right. Okay, going to OSD. OSD does not work in 10.5.0, so we'll jump past that one. Sensors, data log. I don't believe there's a black box. Going to regular Betaflight. Set up my OSD. Receiver. This looks good. I also like to run through one more time. Calibrate, because that looks weird. There we go. All right. If you ever have your accelerometer on and you get some weird actions, like twitches and things, come back in and calibrate your accelerometer. There's a stick command for it too, but this can cause some weird actions if you don't calibrate every now and then. So I always like to do it just randomly when things, after a while, a couple packs, you know, like at the end of the day or whatever. Configuration. D-shot 5.5, motors reversed, 8K, 8K, iBus. Yep, these are good. Good, good. Still good. Smooth 5. Receiver, I don't have to change much. Modes. Adjustments. Now OSD. There we go. I want warnings, average cell. This tells me what one battery is, so I can tell if the quad's going to fall out of the sky or not. Anti-gravity flashes a little AG whenever your anti-gravity mode kicks in. G-force, it's just like it sounds really cool. It tells you how many G's you're pulling. So I always put those up. And I do like when I can get it. Let's see what else. Power. Power requires I don't know if I have a current sensor. but I don't think so. But I'm going to drop these down. If I have it, great. If I don't, no big deal. Throttle position, that's just for me. 69. Timers I use, fly minutes, on minutes. That's pretty much all I use. I do like to drag my voltage warnings down. And afterward, I like flight, in battery, battery. I don't care about in battery, I just care about battery voltage. And I don't have black box. I don't know if I have currents yet, so we're going to save that. Alright, now we're disconnecting from here and going over to BLHeli suite configurator. For this, you can connect, but you need to make sure you power your ESC, so I'm plugging my battery back in. Beep. Read setup. Cool. All right. 16.7, not bad. Low, medium. These I always leave alone, except beacon delay. Kind of do 2 minute, because if I haven't picked a quad up in 2 minutes, something's wrong. And I can't find it. Motor direction. 1 and 4 were good, and 2 needs to be reversed, and 3 needs to be reversed. I am not updating my firmware since it's 16.7, and it seems to work. Is that it? Read. Okay. See, if I wanted to update, I would. Yeah, I'm already at 16.7, so they came updated. Yay. Awesome. Read setup. So normal, reverse. This is for me only. Your mileage may vary. If you wired it up with the quad, the same wires and in normal order, not reverse prop orientation, you'd probably have to change 1 and 4. So going back to BLHeli, connect. My battery's still on and my props are definitely off. Going back to motors, I understand. Once again, I'm holding the quad, so making sure props are off. Oh my god, that hurts! No, it does not. Okay, that one's correct direction. Correct direction. Correct direction. Correct direction. So now we're all in good. And yeah, that amperage rating is totally wrong. It's very funny. It is not drawing that, so we definitely do not have an onboard ADC. And if you see reversed, yeah, that's the way my props should be going. Gives you a nice little diagram. So mine's been out. That is going to do it, and we're going to disconnect and jump over and go for our first flight ever. Alright, so we're actually doing the 4th or 5th flight, and the reason being I was using two 2S batteries instead of one legitimate 4S battery, and performance was not as great with the two 2S, but they weren't pushing as many amps either. So this is with a 750 ZOP battery that is 4S 750. I do not really recommend flying this on 3S unless you want like a really docile flight. Good things about it. Efficiency, I get almost 5 minutes, 4.5 minutes of just trying to whip back and forth, and that's with the King Kong 3050 props. The original props that come with this thing are pathetic, so don't use them. Just go ahead and order some Dow props, or I like the King Kong 3050s. Other good things, even with the punch outs here and everything, I'm just whipping back and forth to see some prop wash. to see how it handles, and it does very well. I have my gyro like you saw on 8K, 8K, and I had very little prop wash, very little problems at all. Punch out is very peppy at 4 Gs almost. If you watch the G meter up top, it does work very well. Prop wash is almost non-existent unless I absolutely try. The wishy-washiness on it is from the original PIDs that were stock with 3.5.5 Betaflight. They're not suitable for this racer, honestly. It's very loose, so you'll see me trying to overcompensate. What I did find later was that I updated the 4.0 Betaflight, one of the development builds, and I'll be doing a video on that. And it is infinitely better, and I can't stress it enough how much better it is. This, however, was amazing to fly, so I have no issues at all with how it was. It just took me a bit to get used to a little bit of the looseness, and I'm 99% sure it's just PIDs. So I know NDRC had great luck with using the 3535 that I posted earlier in this video as far as the P gains go. It is an amazing flyer, quite honestly. I brought the motors down a few times and you couldn't even tell that they had been running. So the 2800 kV motors have a much more kick than you would expect, and they are very efficient, and even on a 55-60 degree day, the motors were they weren't even warm. I mean, you couldn't tell. I mean, legitimately, you could not tell that they were even running. There is no current meter on this, so don't even think that's close to being an accurate current meter. It's just not. It's simply it's the Betaflight thing. So turn off current metering, or the milliamp hours drawn. Just turn that off. Otherwise, it's a fantastic little flyer. I wish the field of view on the camera were wider, but that's because I fly in tight areas. Some people don't like this camera. I actually love it. I thought it was very colorful. It was easy to see. It's just that it was a little scrunched. I believe it's a 16.9 and I'm flying in 4.3. And as far as being usable though, obviously infinitely usable. I missed that tree earlier simply because I got my timing off and didn't realize I was beside it. I've done that before with any camera, so I can't blame this camera for that. VTX pretty good. There's some breakup whenever I get between metal and carbon fiber and whatnot. And other than that, I mean, this for $79, you cannot piece together a 3-inch quad that will fly this well, period. Bar none. Believe me, I've tried. And if you do, let me know what you use, because I want to do that. Motors are definitely the high point on this. They feel amazing. They are also very silent, so I have audio gain control on my camera, and you can hear it in the background. This is the quietest quad I've ever heard. Makes a slight whistling sound and just does great. And like I say, they're very efficient. Definitely the motors are the high point, so I will be swapping this into a 4-inch frame as soon as I can find a suitable one. I feel like those motors would be much better swinging 4-inch props than 3-inch. They had zero issues with the 3-inch props, so I feel like that will be just the better all around. All around, $79, a fantastic flyer. It's also fun to put together. It's very easy. It's an intuitive build, and there really isn't that much more I could ask for. That's going to wrap it up for this. If you stuck around this long, holy cow, good job. Thank you so much. Like and subscribe down below. If you have any questions, please let me know. I love answering, and thank you again. Talk to you later.